Hello and welcome to the Rask Network. What you're about to hear and see is limited to general financial information only. Please be sure to speak to your financial planner or refer to our financial services guide available at rask.com.au/FSG before acting on the information.
Welcome back to the podcast. Today, I'm joined by Zara. Zara, how are you?
I'm good, Jordan. Gearing up for the end of the year. How are you doing?
Yeah, much the same, to be honest. It's chaos. I'd like to say organized chaos, but I don't know how organized it is. And I've spoken to quite a few people this week, and it seems like it's pretty standard. It's just chaos.
Yes. Yep, I think so. I think it's that standard time of thing where at the end of the year, there's a lot of open projects or like just knots or things that you're trying to wrap up. And it just takes a little bit longer than you anticipated.
Yeah, so true. And I actually feel better because I have spoken to a few people. Everyone's the same. So it's not just me.
Relief. It's not just you and alone.
Yeah. So in today's episode, we're introducing the mini series that we're doing for summer, which is cool and exciting, and it's called How to Start a Business in 2025.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So in these episodes, it's going to be a 4-part series, and we're going to cover all things on how to start a business in 2025. And even if you already do have a business and you're established, there's definitely going to be some golden nuggets in there. So don't feel like if you're established that there's nothing in it for you. That there definitely is.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's as we kind of go along as well. Obviously, we're starting with the big idea and like the conceptual beginning, which is like that really exciting moment when you decide that you want to start a business. I think there's also resources that we're dropping in the show notes throughout the series as well. But yeah, it then kind of goes into the next stages of like those actionable, little bit more boring things like setting up your ABN and how to go about like the financial components, but all the really important parts as well.
The boring parts. So everything that I usually do.
The ideation's the exciting part, right?
Yeah, true. And then when they come to the accountant, us, it's not that fun. So
yeah.
Anyway, that's right. I won't take offense. No offense taken.
It can be fun. Maybe just different enjoyments.
You know what? In fairness, in our defense as accountants, every time that we do a cash flow session with someone, they enjoy it because they get value from it.
Yes. I have to say, I think that's one thing this year that I enjoy that I didn't think I would enjoy.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Going through cash flow sessions.
Yeah, it's interesting because it really peels back everything else, and people think, finance too hard. But I think it's one of the most important things, that cash flow session that we do. And it's actually, spoiler alert, but we are going to go through it. It's one of the most beneficial things to do, whether you're starting out pre-revenue or you're doing $1-2 million a year. So important to do. So important to map that stuff out. So
yeah.
Anyway,
absolutely. For sure.
Less boring accounting finance stuff. We'll start with a bit of a weird one, bit of a left field one. So, Zara, question for you.
Go for it.
Worst investment you've ever made in your business?
Ooh, that's a good one, actually.
I've got one. I can go first if you want.
You go first while I think. Go.
So when Dan and I first started, we had to get our website built. And, knowing nothing about this stuff, we're like, cool, we'll find someone. Yeah, we know someone that used them. We'll go with it. So we engaged them, paid the deposit, and then got the website done. And we're doing the first run through. I'm not too sure what it's called the run through. And I noticed that all of the copy was a bit off. Like it didn't. The person that did it, they asked us for some examples of other websites that we liked and copied everything.
Oh no.
And I picked it up and we're in the meeting. I'm like, I've seen that before. Picked it up in the meeting. He said to us, oh, good pickup. Yeah, we'll get that changed. And I was like, good pickup. We've paid you thousands of dollars to build this website. Wow. And then I later found out, I think it was Owen that's like, oh yeah, that's just a template. So paid all that money for a template and we wrote the copy.
Oh no.
Worst investment.
And so was the copy literally a copy and paste of somebody else's business?
Yes. Yep.
Gosh. And in terms of like the brand values and the About Us page and those kinds of things?
It wasn't the About Us page. Credit to them. They used they were unique. But everything else, like front page, service lines, it was so bad.
Oh no.
So yeah, that's I'm not going to name and shame them, but that's, you know what, worst investment. It was just I was so frustrated because they did nothing and we did it all. It's just very annoying.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, I think mine is kind of a combination of like a lack of process and like a lack of patience. I think that's generally probably one of my areas of opportunity is having a little bit more patience in my decision making. I often make like rush decisions. And so I think it was quite early on in the business when we were trying to hire someone for a specific role. I just kind of hired one of the first like 2 people that I interviewed. Credit to him, he was good at a lot of things, but unfortunately the role that he was hired for wasn't his area of special expertise. And so from that point onwards, for the next couple of months, I kind of was on the back foot in the sense that we had some work coming in to be serviced for this particular department, didn't have the best person in that department, then kind of had to reactionary kind of jump in and take on a lot of that work myself. Unfortunately, wasn't the plan, but kind of being a business owner, you just have to kind of like jump in and just make things work. So I think that, it just took a little while, I think, and it just came down to like making rash decisions, which meant quite a lot more extra work for me and just kind of like the stress of making sure that deliverables were at a standard that I was happy with. But we kind of resolved that. We got somebody else who's phenomenal as the next point of call. So I think it's probably like just, rushed decisions.
Yeah, it's true. It happens all the time. And it's funny when you speak to people about these things, it's a lot of the times it is staff. It's so hard to get right, no matter how small, how big you are.
Mm-hmm. And that first hire is just so important. And this was my first hire.
Oh, how's that? Welcome. Welcome to business.
Yeah.
You're trying to make your life easier, you just made it harder.
Yeah, significantly. It's okay. It's resolved, and have an awesome person now. Phenomenal person in that role. So it all works out.
Amen to that. Yeah, that's it. Sometimes it's for the better.
Yes. And it just emphasizes the importance of that.
Yeah. Amen. Couldn't agree more. So to jump in our first episode on our mini series on how to start a business, the first part to talk about is something that we've spoken about quite a few times, and it's the what. It's starting with why, and the power of having purpose as well. Yep. So a super loaded question. How would you identify that?
Yeah, that's such a good question. I think I kind of like to talk about it as like your North Star, or like what is your guiding point to help you make decisions throughout the duration of the business. And so really comes down to like motivations, passions, what you're really excited about, and kind of why you started the business. I think that's really important too, like thinking back to why did this even come about? And what was kind of the greater purpose of it. So not just like, I want to start a business, or the idea of like, running business is sexy, or whatever it might be, but it's like the idea of like, cool, what are you aiming to serve? What problem are you wanting to alleviate? And then I think that can really help you thread into like your passions and your values for the business. And that can really help to build like your customer avatars as well. But yeah, I think it's like, for me, it's like your North Star, like what kind of guides you and fuels your motivation.
Yep, couldn't agree more. The thing that you mentioned there is always your values. I think it's so important at the start to get them nutted out. I know Dan and I, we did that at the start, because as you're going through the motions, you can easily get sidetracked and you forget, and you're going through the day-to-day and you get to the end of the day and like, what have I even done? But having those values there where you can remind yourself, like for us, it's client first always.
Yeah.
And we try to but we do push that to all the staff, especially when you need to get things done. It's like, cool, client first, always client first. So I think that's super important. In terms of how to do those sessions, we followed Gino Wickman's book Traction, where they have their big day session. And we've spoken about that quite a few times, but just write 10, 20 values on the whiteboard. And just process of elimination, then order them 1 to 5, 1 to 10, however you want to do it. I think that's super important when you are starting out, so you don't lose sight. And then as well, like what problems are we aiming to solve? And again, Gino Wickman's book Traction really helps with this stuff in that infancy stage. So I'd strongly recommend that one.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think it's kind of, thinking about, and I know we're going to talk about it in a little bit more as well, but like coming up with like what specific problem you're trying to solve. And I think it's really hard because quite often in business and it's very common that business owners get excited about something. They want a certain product or they want a certain service done. So it's without doing kind of that idea validation, which we'll get into as well. But sometimes you can kind of just go full steam ahead with something without kind of being like, okay, does it make sense? Is this the right decision for me? Is this the right decision for customers? Is this something that people actually want? And I think if you can get really granular on like your why and your purpose, which, you know, for us is really about just like creating honest, long-lasting, sustainable relationships with clients. And through that, it's helping to guide them, whether it's through coaching, whether it's through marketing, whatever the actual service might be. But at the end of the day, it's focused on like honesty, transparency, and like getting results. But I think then that can kind of help to guide any decision that you make in terms of, am I going to, you know, introduce another service or another product? Well, why would I introduce another service, and how does it alleviate or how does it service who I'm trying to serve?
Yep, I agree. And an important thing just on that note is it helps you avoid that shiny object syndrome. And that's something that happens sometimes with me, where again, just talking about services, we could offer that, we could offer that, could offer this. And a lot of the times when your values or that why is there and it's black and white, it can help keep you on track.
Yep. Yeah, for sure. And I think the next part of that is like, once you've kind of found out what you're passionate about and what you really enjoy, find out if like, does that align with your skill set? Because I think you need to be able to do it yourself, or you need to have people within your network that you can lean on that can essentially carry out the task or carry out the service of the product. But yeah, I think that's kind of the other thing. And I think if you can, I think Owen and I talked about it in an episode a couple of weeks ago, and Beth from St. Jack, we spoke to her back in August, I think, and she spoke about it really well, that you want to find something, if you're going to start a business, you want to find something that you are so passionate about, but also that you can do, because it's going to get hard at some points and it's going to be challenging and it's going to be tough. But if you can always kind of go back to, yes, I'm willing to kind of be resilient and work through this. And if it also overlines with something that you're good at, then you kind of have that consistent sort of like positive reinforcement of something successful happens and then you get a good result and you're also really passionate about it. It kind of all fuels one another.
Yeah. You get that compounding effect.
Yeah, for sure.
Now, when we go through and let's say, we know our passion, we know our values, how do we then turn that into a mission statement? And I guess, what is a mission statement?
Yeah, that's a good one. So the way that I would kind of define a mission statement is it's like a very clear purpose or a very clear statement that helps attract customers. That could be investors, it could be clients, it could be, you know, B2C customers, it could even be employees. But essentially helps to attract people to your organization. And it's through like a connection of mission and values. So outside of the service and like what you actually do, but it's like why you do it and how you do it. Yeah,
couldn't agree more. And that's something that we've done Race-Base, and again, strongly suggest everyone to doing it. And it's the fluffy stuff that's like back burner, not important, because people just focus on like getting the sales and the finance. But I really do think it's up there with the most important things to do, especially at the start. Especially at the start, because at the start you may or may not have a bit more time. Maybe that's not a good time's not a good example, but again, it just helps with alignment as you're going through the motions, as you're organizing your finance, as you're organizing your marketing and your sales, or even your product. Get all this stuff done. So it's done at the start, and then you can refine it. Don't think it's set in stone. You can always revisit it year on year, but it just helps again. That North Star. I like that. I'm going to steal it.
It's a good one. I actually got it from someone else that I used to work with as well. North Star, guiding star, true north. Yeah, it's all kind of the same thing. But if anyone's, I'm sure you would have heard of him. His name's Simon Sinek. Incredible as just like a leader, as an inspiring person, has done heaps and heaps of work and research into people management, developing teams, and one of his most recent, one of his most well-known books is called Start With Why, and he does a TED Talk on it. And I think it's a book that you can read. You can also get a very short synopsis through watching I think it's about a 45-minute TED Talk. And there's even a shorter, like 5-minute snippet, which we'll actually drop in the show notes. But it is just the synopsis of kind of what his book's about. And it really talks about people don't buy what you do. They don't buy how you do it. They buy why you do it. And he illustrates it through a circle. So there's kind of like your outer circle, which is your what, and then the next kind of level in, which is a depth of knowledge, a depth of information, a depth of kind of context, is kind of how you do it. But then the inner circle, which is where your most loyal customers are, and where like true fans sit, and that's kind of why you do it. And so the book itself, Start With Why by Simon Sinek, the book itself talks about that in terms of business, but it also really talks about finding your why and starting your why as a person. And then he's kind of got a follow-up book, which is called Finding Your Why. And so it's kind of the actionable points and how to kind of move forward. But that was one of the very first books I think I read stepping into a leadership role maybe like 5 years ago. Just phenomenal. I just got so much out of it in terms of myself, in terms of how to communicate with others, but also, just in terms of how to communicate business values and brand values.
Yeah, cool. And I guess while we're on the topic of book club, do you have any other
book club?
Any other recommendations?
Yeah. Atomic Habits is another good one by James Clear. Again, we had a book club that we actually every month we had a book, whether it was like relevant to business growth, whether it was relevant to personal development or leadership or people management. And each month we will go through as a team, we will kind of talk about the book, what we got out of it, and just really highlight some things, and then how we were going to action it in the workplace. And Atomic Habits was a really interesting one because the way that I work is just like very frantic. And I'll start something, I don't finish something. And Atomic Habits is a way that you can, over time, build bigger habits by essentially implementing smaller actionable habits into your day-to-day. And it's the smallest kind of change that then steps into the next element of change. So for example, if you're like, I want to go to the gym 5 days a week, but at the moment you don't go at all. It's like, okay, well, how do you get there? Okay, well, you book your class the night before. That's your first habit. Your next habit is have your workout gear, laid out so you don't have to think about it in the morning. So it's kind of like reducing any potential friction points that could be associated with you actually achieving that goal or doing that task. And so the one that James Clear talks about is, gym was kind of the one that we can all very easily relate to. And it's just about having a big goal and then kind of breaking it down into smaller daily digestible habits. And it might be that once you've got your workout clothes, then your running shoes or your active shoes or your sneakers or whatever are at the back door. So it's like they're the shoes that you put on when you go outside. Having a playlist ready or whatever it might be. And he's got a lot of templates in the book as well. But I found that I think that's another really great book. I don't know, what have you got?
Just on that book, I'm pretty sure it is that book. There's a chapter where he talks about how a plane, when it's taking off, if it's off by like a millimeter, in the long run, it can be hundreds of or thousands of kilometers away from its destination. I remember that chapter very distinctly. It's always stuck with me. I think it's such an interesting one. But books for me, I always talk about it on the podcast. I think it's a non-negotiable for any small business owner. Traction by Gino Wickman, just from start to finish, really, in terms of strategy, business structure, not business structure, but organizational structure, the values, passion, 1 year plan, 10-year plan. Couldn't recommend it enough. And it's a really easy read, especially if you don't like reading. I think it's such a good read. Next level up from that, same type of book is Scaling Up by Verne, Harnish, I think is the author. And that's a bit more like a uni textbook, to be honest. But again, there's some great things in there. And then Blue Ocean Strategy is a really good book as well. And one of my standouts from that is how they talk about just being different. And they use the example of what the circus was. Oh God, it wasn't even that long ago, maybe 50 years ago or 30 years ago, where it's all about the animals and I don't know if freak show is the right word to use, but just different acts. And now you look at how Cirque du Soleil has just annihilated and just changed that industry. It's a $100 million company, hundreds of millions of dollars. So I suggest that too, especially at that infancy stage when you're developing your idea and whatnot. I think it's a super good read. If there was one Christmas list, or if this goes out after Christmas, New Year's list, Traction by Wickman. Every business owner should read it, no matter where you're at.
Yeah, I can second that. We read that as part of our book club as well. It was really, really handy. We were at the time we're doing an organizational restructure. So we were kind of changing not just departments, we were changing roles, responsibilities, who was sitting in those roles. So it just gave us essentially a pathway for how to make these changes in the context of the organization. So not actually finding roles for people based on the people, but setting up the roles in the organization that the organization needs to succeed, and then finding the right person for that role rather than kind of doing it the other way around. But I think, same as you, I would say Traction's probably a really great one.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. It's an easy read.
Yes, and there's resources online as well.
Yeah, you feel it, like everything that he speaks about in there. You can just print the resources out and fill it out yourself. So, non-negotiable read, to be honest. So, how do you think we go about identifying gaps in the market and finding those opportunities when we are in that infancy stage?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think there's a few different ways that you can go about finding those gaps in the market. But again, I think going back to some of the things I mentioned earlier in terms of understanding what problem your business is trying to solve. And is it a problem that already exists? As in, is it a problem that customers know exists and that they are aware of and that they know that they're trying to actively solve? Is it something that, the customers are trying to solve, they know it's a problem. Are there competitors in the industry and how are they currently solving it? And then how is your product or service solving that need or that problem better than your competitors? And we've got a link that we'll share in the show notes that we've created, which is essentially a list of about 12 different questions that you can ask yourself. Because I think sometimes when we're, again, in this really exciting phase of ideation, product development, coming kind of into those next steps, it can be quite hard to kind of take an objective step back and say, okay, well, is this actually a good idea? And so, I mean, I might just pull up the questionnaire and just read out a couple of questions just to kind of, I guess, reiterate the point a little bit more. But so, when we're talking about like problem validation is essentially helping us to validate as potential business owners, helping us to validate, is there a real problem out there? So, what specific problem are you trying to solve? Who experiences this particular problem? So going into your target audience and their characteristics and their traits. How are people currently dealing with this problem? So that's kind of when we talk about looking at our competitors, and are there anything or any shortcomings? So is there anything that your competitors aren't doing that you could kind of leverage, and that could be your niche? How significant is the problem for your target audience? So again, is it a really major pain point? Is it something that people face every single day? Or is it something pretty minor that we don't actually think about all that often? In which case there's probably going to be quite a lot of education. Maybe it's not the best decision. Maybe it's not the best business to move into as your first business. And then, is your target audience aware that this problem exists? And are they actively trying to seek a solution? And then I think the last thing is getting evidence, getting evidence that solution or that problem actually exists.
And I think something that you can do there is to lean into your network.
Yes.
When you want to get help around that validation and whatever it may be. So once you've done that self-assessment, reach out, see if you can find a mentor in your network that can support you, or you can find someone to get advice and some guidance from too. So I think it's just really important to lean into your network. You don't want to get caught up in the whole starting a new business and get caught up in the wrong reasons for starting a business. Like if the goal is just to make money and get rich as quick as possible, or you hate your job because it's cool, recipe for disaster. It is because absolutely. Again, going back to purpose and passion, if the purpose and passion is just, I hate my job, all I want to do is make money and I want to be cool, trendy, whatever you want to call it, it's not the foundations you want to build a business on.
Yeah, I agree. I think also kind of going into the leveraging your network and also thinking about like if that problem exists, I think also just like analyzing trends and like figuring out where you can look for that information, because obviously, to find this data can be quite difficult if you don't have a network. And there's heaps of different tools out there that you can use for for research, for business research, industry research.
For sure. Just to rattle a few off, there's Google Trends,
yes,
Ibis World. I remember they used to give us access to that at uni.
Yeah.
Get those massive reports.
Yeah.
The ABS, even AI tools as well. Chat GPT, again, don't take it as Bible, gospel, but use that to quickly summarize information or ask a quick question. I'm thinking of starting X business in this industry. What are some key things I should be looking at from a statistic or trends point of view? And it's getting so good where you're going to get some decent information there. And you can even ask for the source. So I would strongly suggest using that because it's going to save you time.
Yeah, absolutely. I think on that as well, maybe just to give a little bit more about like Google Trends, essentially that helps you to understand like search interest and trending topics. And you can see that if there's like an increase in volume, then it helps you to see like, okay, well, year on year, the increase in search volumes increase in this particular industry or this particular topic. It could be that there is an increasing interest in that industry. So it essentially helps you to validate, okay, cool, this is something that people are actively searching for. I used in uni for my Master of Marketing was Roy Morgan Research. And it was pretty crazy. It's Australian-based data, and it's just a single source database. So essentially the same people do the research and share the research and kind of combine everything. But it really went into like consumer demographics and behaviors and attitudes. And it was crazy. Like I remember my like 24-year-old brain or 23 or however old I was when I did that degree was just like, oh my God, how do I have access to all of this data on Australian households? Like significant data. But again, we used it for our research projects for the master's degree to kind of, we were presenting to different industries and different businesses on things that they could look at and how they could tap into different customers. So it was really interesting. And the other thing I think is social media listening tools, which essentially is it's a software that uses conversations, like scary, but it monitors conversations and trends on social media platforms in Australia. So there's ones like Bandwatch and Mention are quite common, but it's essentially listening to the physical conversations that you're having through social media.
How does that work? So like my phone is sitting here and can that hear me?
So,
I'm already convinced it can, so I don't care what you're going to say.
Well, the way that these work is more so based on like the texted conversations that you're having throughout the channels. Yes. So not actively listening to what you're saying, but that's up for debate.
Yeah. It's interesting you say that because every time, I can't remember, there was a product I was talking about with someone and then you're getting targeted ads. Please. Yeah. Never searched it on Google.
It's pretty spooky, isn't it?
It is. It's weird. But I guess back to like the research, it'll help when you do have that defined target audience. It'll help you when you are doing your research as well.
Yes.
Look at the numbers.
Yeah. Absolutely.
All the different data. And some of this stuff is expensive. I know Ibis World, I remember I checked it once to get a subscription to it is so expensive. So some of this stuff can be expensive, but just utilize those free tools because there are free tools available.
Yes. Yeah. And I think the other thing is not just relying on one source. Like don't just rely on Google Trends or don't just rely on social media listening tools or the Australian Bureau of Statistics. Kind of combine things. And I think if you can get qualitative, which is like written, and quantitative like analysis, you're going to kind of have just essentially a much more confident step in the next direction in that business journey. And then I guess the next part of there is like, so once you've done your research and you kind of think, okay, cool, this is a viable business decision. Where do you go from there? What do you do?
Good question. Hopefully you have a bit of a network and you can lean into that network. Wait lists, surveys, if there's a community that you can reach out to. Again, doesn't have to be online. It can be your friendship group, friends, family. That's how I would do it. But I'm sure you have some better ideas than me.
No, I think essentially validating your idea, right, is kind of what you want to do. Like, cool, the research might tell you that someone's interested in that thing, but you need to find out if people within your vicinity of where you're thinking of offering this service or this product are actually going to pay for it. So I think, surveys is a really good one. Interestingly enough, when my husband and I first moved out of the city before inflection, we thought, I don't know, I've spoken to you about this before and you laughed at me.
Now everyone's going to know.
Now everyone's going to know. It's okay. Our first ideas aren't always the best. We thought we wanted to start a co-working space. Yeah.
Right.
So our idea was having this really beautiful kind of space in regional Victoria, where there was like an increasing population of like a younger demographic between the ages of like 30 and kind of like 45. So like, cool, people are going to be moving from the city. They're going to have jobs in the city. They're going to need somewhere to work. Working from home gets boring. We wanted this I think goes back into like, is it something that you just want? We were working from home. We wanted to get out and be amongst people. So in our brains, we were like, yep, cool. We're going to do a co-working space. It's going to have a cute little cafe at the front and we're going to do like networking events. So we kind of put all of these ideas together. We spoke to a few people in our immediate friendship circle. Some people were like, oh yeah, cool. I mean, yeah, I kind of like working from home. I go to Melbourne like once or twice a week. I don't know if I'd use it, but it's a good idea. And we were like, okay, but that's just one person. Like we'll just get more information. More people are going to be keen on this. At this point, we were also looking at commercial leases. We weren't at the point we were signing, but we were doing walkthroughs. Again, like I said, I make rash decisions. And then we were like, okay, no, we actually need to find out if this is a good business decision or not. So we created a survey online. We just used like Google surveys, Google Forms, and wrote all of these questions. It might have been like a 20 question survey, just so we could get some context on what would people want, how frequently would they use it, how much would they pay, what services would they want. So we could say, okay, well, because we were trying to work out profit margins, essentially. We were essentially trying to walk away from it and be like, cool, if this is what a lease cost, how many people would we need on a weekly basis to sustain the lease? What would that look like monthly? How long would their membership need to be? And then based on, average outgoings and bills and all this kind of stuff, and for us to take salaries out of it, what would that look like? How many people would we need in the co-working space? And the data that came back was pretty minimal, I have to say. We had about like 10 responses. And it was super varied from someone wanted a fax machine and wanted to pay $7 a week for full-time access.
Nice.
And anyway, long story short, through this, we realized that it probably wasn't the best idea.
Yeah.
And that there had been other co-working spaces. There's a really big kind of co-working space in the next kind of major city. So we realized it probably wasn't a good idea. We let it go. We objectively were able to be like, okay, it's not going to be a good decision. But I think I don't think we would have ever gone any further having not done that survey. But I think it's an example of something that you can get so excited about something and think it's just like an amazing idea. And we were obviously our own little echo chamber of being like, oh, we could do this and we could do this and oh, that'd be sick. Imagine if we did this. And then once you kind of put it out there, you go, okay, no one really wants this thing.
Yeah, I think it's such an important skill when you're going through this stage and you've gone through, you've done your values and identified gaps in the market. That's all good. But the stage that you've just spoken about when you are trying to validate, and you guys overcame it, which is great, is confirmation bias, where you're always trying to find the answer that you want. And even when you're reaching out, and if you are reaching out to friends, like that can be, you can have an issue there because it's like a group think. It's like no one wants to go against the grain. It's like, oh, it's Zara's new business. We don't want to do that. So that can, to play devil's advocate for what we just said you should do, just be conscious of the people that you are asking. And they're not telling you what you want to hear, but what the truth is, because it's super important. And groupthink and confirmation bias can be very big problems when you are trying to validate ideas.
And this, in terms of like survey tools and getting those out there, like what we actually did was Google Forms is free. We paid for a QR code for 30 days. We created the QR code that went directly to the Google Forms. We then printed out physical posters. And we went around town in like all the notice boards
good stuff.
on like empty building spaces next to kind of made like really popular cafes. We just stuck this poster up. And so we put it in, supermarkets, all of these really common areas that people were walking. It still didn't get much data, but again, it was just like, you can kind of do it. All we paid for was the QR code, which I think might have been like $10 for the month, and the paper to get it printed at Officeworks.
Yep. There you go.
That was it.
There really is no excuses. If you don't have a network that you can reach out to, there's all these other things that you can do. And don't think like that's a really cool example of like a niche business, co-working space. But even if you're a service-based business, if you're a photographer, if you're a tradesperson of whatever your trade is, if you're a plumber or a sparky, you can still do all of these things. Yeah. You should take all of these steps before you go out and start your business. And I had a phone call with someone who listens to the podcast, looking at buying a bakery in the Northern Territory. And some of the stuff that she's done, sorry, I don't know why this has come to my mind, but I was just amazed. 22 years old. And I thought, yeah, good on you. Like, she's doing so well, listening to all this stuff, resources, the finance side of things. But again, having the why, early stages of business, it's something that we ran through. It's like, why are you doing this? What's the purpose? Loves baking.
Yep.
So,
absolutely. That's amazing.
Yes, so important to do this stuff in the early stages of business, regardless of where you're at.
100%. And if anyone has any questions, is in a stage where you have a bit of an idea, you think you've done some research and you're feeling stuck and you're not sure, in the show notes, we have a link to our free online community, which is a community of hundreds of business owners at the moment. And it's just a space for you to roundtable ideas. The four of us coaches, Jordan, Daniel, myself, and Owen, are all in that community frequently. So if you have a question for us, jump in the show notes, go to the link, and we will essentially help you figure out if this is a good business decision, and if you can kind of continue down that investigative path.
Yeah. As a business owner, sometimes it is just that one question that's going to help you sleep at night that you need answered. And I'm lucky where I've got Zara, Owen, Dan, and a bunch of other friends and people in my network where I can do that. And if you don't, that community is a really good space to just drop those questions, get those answers, so then you can keep making that forward progress.
Yep, absolutely. So I guess just to kind of like wrap things up and then kind of talk about what's coming next. So we've really covered the importance of starting with why, finding your passion and really sticking with that. And, your why is your North Star, helping you to make next business decisions, how to find gaps in the market, how to identify if this is a good business opportunity, and then obviously the importance of validating your idea, and some ways to do that as well. So what's coming up next, Jords? What's the next episode?
Now we are talking about all the fun stuff you made fun of at the start. We're going to cover a bit on the business, like the foundations of business. So structuring, making sure you're choosing the right structure, how to manage your business financials, software that you need to use, trying to find sourcing product, manufacturing, if that's what you're doing, if you are selling products. So it'll be a super loaded episode with heaps of awesome content in there. And we've also got some resources as well, which we'll be handing out. They'll be in the show notes.
And every Sunday, episode drops every Sunday. So we'll see you next week.
We'll see you Sunday.
Thanks, George.
Thanks, Zara. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for watching this video on the Rask Network. While you're here, don't forget to like and subscribe so you can get videos each and every day on business, finance, investing, and so much more.